So welcome to tonight's meeting. Thank you for coming along. My name is John Dove. I'm a solicitor advocate at MAJ Law, and some of you may well know me because I run the National Speed Mooting competition. Tonight's event is the second in a series of Q&A sessions that I've been organising. Tonight's panel features a panel of solicitors, so you'll be able to have any questions answered in relation to the application process, interviews, life and practice, the LPC, the SQE, things of that nature. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over now to Sunny Salam just to introduce herself. She's organised this series of events with me. So Sunny, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, John. Hi everyone, I'm Sunny, as John said. I'm a second year trainee at Wilkinson Solicitors, which is a West Midlands based firm. Currently in my last seat doing civil litigation and employment litigation, due to qualify 1st of October, pending pandemic. Other than that, I do some professional mentoring with BCU students, and I know John from having been a judge at one of his national speed mooting competitions. So that's it from me. I'll hand you over to John. He'll introduce the panel to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 7 practitioners on the panel tonight. So I'll introduce you to them and they'll just say a couple of words about themselves. So first we have Lucy Stephen, who is a solicitor at Crombie Wilkinson.
Hi everybody, I'm Lucy. I'm a private client solicitor at Crombie Wilkinson. We're a regional firm in North Yorkshire, 4 offices across North Yorkshire. We do a lot of agricultural farming sort of work. My practice is mainly wills, probate, bits of tax advice as well. And also I work on trust matters as well as that. So administering trusts. I do lasting powers of attorney and a lot of elderly client work as well.
Thank you. Next we have Sunil Singh, who is a solicitor at Freshfields.
Hi everybody, I am an associate at Freshfields. I'm working in the commercial dispute resolution department. So I act for a number of substantial corporate investment banks and a sort of wide range of complex commercial disputes, both domestically and cross-border. Like Sunny, I know John because I've judged at one of his previous speed mooting events. I'm sort of happy to just answer any questions that any of you may have tonight.
Thank you. Next we have Shauna Thompson, who is a solicitor at Praxis Law.
Hi everyone, so yeah, I'm a solicitor advocate at Praxis Law. We are based in Manchester city centre and we're kind of a quasi, in-house role. We do commercial property, so I kind of mainly do commercial property and commercial litigation with property litigation, so it's a bit of a hybrid role. And yeah, I'll happily answer any questions you guys have too.
Thank you. Next, we have Ishrat Noori, who is a solicitor at Issat and Co Solicitors.
Oh, hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Ishrat Noori. I practice in Issat and Co Solicitors, which is in London. And I'm a sole practitioner since 2008. So I predominantly work with immigration and civil litigation, as well as some family matters privately. So I know John. I have been involved with judging for the last 3 years with John's speed mooting competition. I'll be happy to answer any question that you might have. Thank you. I'll hand over to John.
Thank you. Next, we have Stephen Sadler, who is a solicitor at DAC Beachcroft.
Hi everyone, so as John said, I'm a solicitor at DAC Beachcroft. I'm based in our Bristol office. My background at the moment, I'm currently 3 years PQE and I'm part of our regulatory team, and that essentially is kind of the broad brush description for defence, primarily kind of what you might call commercial crime or white collar crime. So that's kind of environmental work, health and safety, and then some more kind of broad regulatory matters, so kind of water board, electricity board kind of cases and traffic commissioners' inquiries. That's probably what I do.
Thank you. We have Dave Chester, who is a trainee solicitor at Davies and Partners.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Dave, and as John said, I'm a trainee. I'm currently based at Davies and Partners with offices in Gloucester, Bristol, Birmingham, and London. I did my first seat in conveyancing, my second in employment, and my third and final seat, which I'm in now, in property litigation.
Thank you. And finally, we have Andrew Ball, who is a future trainee solicitor at Weightmans.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Andrew Ball, paralegal at Weightmans. I'm currently also chair of Merseyside Junior Lawyers. I specialise particularly in industrial disease work, but primarily I also have a side specialisation with fraud as well.
And we have Sarah Ramsey from BPP Law School.
I'll forgive you for that, John. I'm the Dean at the University of Law in Birmingham, rather than BPP. We're not going to mention that name again today.
We won't say that again.
Yeah, I'm the Dean at the University of Law in Birmingham, so I've got responsibility for the Birmingham campus. I moved from practice there to become a tutor back when we opened in 2001, so it's our 20th anniversary next year. Hopefully we'll actually be able to get back in the building and have a party. Back in practice, I spent about 6 years in practice before moving into legal education, mostly working in the Northwest for sort of fairly large regional firms, doing family law, really mixed bag of stuff, including some childcare, public law, so that's my background.
Thank you for that. That's what happens when you make last minute changes like that. But I've added Sarah to tonight's panel because I think that she'll be invaluable in terms of the advice that she can give, because she can give a lot of advice in relation to the LPC and of course the SQE, whereby there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. In terms of the format for tonight, the way it's going to work is we'll begin the session with the pre-prepared questions that some of you have submitted in advance. Then when we get to around 8 o'clock, we'll jump onto any spontaneous questions that we have tonight. So if you have any questions, when we get to that section of the meeting, you can switch on your camera and put your hands up, or there's a button to put your hand up. Or alternatively, if you want to keep your camera off, there is a function for you to put a question into the chat as well. So if you want to keep your camera off, you're more than welcome to do so and simply put any questions into the chat. And when we move on to that section of the meeting, then we can deal with that. In terms of all of the participants tonight, you will notice that you are on mute when you join the meeting. We'll keep you on mute throughout, but once you get to a point whereby you want to ask a question, then you'll be more than welcome to switch that off once you've been selected. Okay, so what we will do tonight is we'll jump straight into the pre-prepared questions. So the first question that we have is, what is the most fulfilling aspect of your role? And we'll turn to Shauna first for this one.
I think for me, because I'm such a kind of problem solver and I really like attention to detail, I like combining that with kind of exceeding client expectations. So for me, it's really just about providing the best service and the best quality that I'm able to give, kind of in being able to give legal advice and being able to kind of guide clients through a transaction, you know, from start to finish.
Brilliant, thank you. Lucy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about helping people through a really difficult time in their lives. So in my line of work, I'm dealing with people who've been bereaved in the last few days sometimes, people who have elderly relatives who've lost mental capacity. So it's really nice to help them go through what's actually quite a difficult, complex process, to help them get through that and support them through that. And you get to do some quite nice things in private client as well, things like, you know, dishing out money to charities and things like that. So it's actually quite rewarding to feel that you're actually making a difference in that way.
Thank you. And then from a trainee's point of view, do you have any further comments, Dave?
Yeah, I think learning new skills is quite a key part of my role, and it's something that I enjoy. No day's the same. Every day you're learning off someone who has been, you know, in the area for 10, 20, 30 years. And even when you're qualified, you're still learning new things all the time. The law is very dynamic. It's always changing. For example, furlough leave with employment recently, that's something a lot of employment lawyers have to get their heads around. So yeah, I think learning new things and the dynamic element of the law is something that I enjoy.
Great, thank you. Okay, Sunny, do you have the next question?
Yeah, thanks. So question number 2, will having work experience from varying industries, not just solely legal based experience, help when applying for jobs in the legal sector? I think Sarah, you might be quite good to answer that, because we know that you've done various other different things before and having been in practice before. So should we start with you first?
Yeah, thanks, Sunil. And I think as well, just in terms of feedback we get from our client firms And obviously we've had a lot of students going through the employability service who are feeding back on interview experiences. I think what's really important at the moment is that most recruiters are looking at competencies. They're looking at you and what you can do. And I think there's also a big push in the legal profession actually to recognise that in terms of diversity and inclusion, people are not just going to be going through necessarily a straightforward, you know, I do my A levels, I go to this university at 18, I have parents who are funding everything for me, and then I'm stepping into a job with somebody I know. You know, things are starting to change. And I think it's every bit as valid to say, you know, I have been doing childcare as well as managing my legal studies part-time. I have been working in the local fast food restaurant and I've taken responsibility for managing a small team there. But using those things to demonstrate the skills that you've gained from that, whether that is sheer organisational skills of juggling several things at once, management of a project or other people, whether it's handling money, whether it's simply reliability and the fact that you can work as part of a team. So what you need to do is take your experiences, whether they're legal or not, and show how they demonstrate competencies. I think people realise now not everyone's got the same journey, and it's about showing what you have and what you have gained from your experiences is the important thing.
Thanks, Sarah. Really useful, really comprehensive answer. Sunil, do you want to add anything more to that, to what Sarah said?
I couldn't agree more with Sarah, to be honest. I think, you know, the law requires a lot of different skills. I mean, technical knowledge and being able to work on cases and have a thorough legal understanding of legal issues is only a very small part of what we do. You have to have commercial awareness, you have to have management skills, you know, you have to manage people both internally and externally in terms of clients, you have to have different skills to go out and win new work for your firm. So I think the more experience you have and the more of a chance you give yourself to develop other skills in addition to legal technical ability will make the world of a difference to you.
Thanks, Sunil. Ishrat, did you want to add anything else to that?
I think I agree with both of the panelists. Really, the lifelong element of learning and experience is quite valuable to this profession. So I think that is quite important that when the interview period comes, then you maybe utilize those issues to express the thoughts from the experience that someone has got in their lifelong learning process. So that's all I can really add with the two panelists, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Some very comprehensive answers there, and I think the reality is with this sort of situation, it's all about transferable skills. I think that's the key word. So any job that you've had in life, it can be, you know, as simple as shelf stacking all the way through to much more glamorous jobs, but any skill you gain can be transferred to a job as a lawyer. And I think, as Sunil pointed out, one of the key skills that you can possibly have is people skills. You know, regardless of what type of law you go into, at a fundamental level, you're going to be dealing with people. You need to give advice, and you need to be in a position whereby your client trusts you to accept that advice. So you need to know how to deal with a variety of different people. And by taking experience from previous roles that you've undertaken, you can transfer that to a career as a lawyer. The next question that we've had, it's quite a wordy one, this, and this is probably one for our commercial property lawyers on the panel. It says, as some companies have found working from home beneficial for both their business and employees, do you think that there will be a decrease in the amount of commercial office space being leased post-COVID-19? And how can law firms respond to this and protect their real estate clients? Do you have anyone that wants to jump in and suggest an answer on this one?
I can probably answer the first half of the question, but I'll probably leave the second half in terms of protection of commercial real estate clients to somebody in that practice area. I mean, I think the way we practice law is already changing very rapidly, even pre-COVID-19. Law firms are, you know, one of very many businesses that have invested in technology vastly over the last few years. And I think it's evident in the way that a lot of us have been able to switch to working from home overnight. COVID-19, if anything, has taught lawyers that you don't need to be in an office. And we're already seeing the firms like Slater and Gordon, they've decided to shut down their London office and, you know, let people work from home permanently. And I think we're going to see a lot of other law firms follow suit.
Excellent. I think that's quite correct, and we are seeing a lot of law firms going that way. And even just in terms of sort of court hearings, we're seeing a lot more of those become remote, and we're seeing more and more telephone hearings, more and more hearings taking place over Microsoft Teams. In fact, I think that there was a full trial ran on Skype recently. So we are seeing changes from that point of view. And do we have anyone else on the panel that wants to contribute towards this answer? Shauna?
Yeah, so I think there will be a decrease, but I actually don't know to what degree, just because obviously there are still companies and firms that, you know, and clients that still want kind of office space. They want to see people kind of in their seats. It's a bit of a kind of old mentality, but they kind of want to, you know, be able to keep an eye on you, make sure you're working. And also, you know, I've spoken to clients and colleagues who actually prefer working in an office. They hate working from home, and obviously kind of face-to-face meetings and kind of for dispute resolution. It's a lot easier to kind of, you know, meet in office spaces. So I do think they'll stay. It just, I think it will be greatly reduced because people can, you know, work from home and remotely. As to kind of how we can help our clients, it's a bit hard because everything's so unknown. You know, we don't know where we're going to be coming out of this. Clients don't know how their businesses are going to operate. You know, at the moment, it's kind of a free-for-all. And I think everyone's a bit hesitant to make any big decisions until they can kind of see how things are going and kind of what's coming on the horizon, really. So I think the only way we can really assist is to kind of stay on top of, you know, the legislation and kind of, you know, stay at the forefront of what's going on to kind of advise them as best we can. That would kind of be my position on it. But obviously, you know, it is such unprecedented times that it's so hard to kind of know where we're going and where clients are going. But as an industry, law is actually, you know, really quite backwards. You know, it has taken a long time, and I think it's kind of needed the pandemic to move law into remote working and, you know, statutory declarations. It was just a position that people would do them face to face, but there was no need for that, you know. And I think it's now kind of starting to force people in law and legislation and courts to kind of start viewing things a bit differently. So I think it'll be a different kind of environment that we'll be going out into, and our clients as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are going to see big changes over the next few years, but what those changes will be, we don't know. Yeah. Sunny, do you have the fourth question there?
Yeah, so what drew you to become a solicitor rather than go to the bar? I'll have a show of hands on this one. Does anybody want to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Shauna.
So I actually never really considered the bar. From my point of view, I always wanted to see clients from the start to the finish, to, you know, see a transaction through to the end. You know, I wanted to be there kind of every step of the way. I wanted to understand the transaction, and, you know, I wanted to kind of get a better grasp of the case. So for me, you know, I love kind of being a solicitor, and I like that, but I also obviously did my higher rights of audience so that I can, if I want to, take matters to court. So, you know, it is kind of an option that if you want to kind of do both, you can, you know, you can kind of go down the solicitor route and then do your higher rights of audience at a later date. For me, I just love the kind of methodology of it. I like, you know, the detail. I like really getting to grips and having the time to get to grips with a case, because often barristers are kind of thrown in the deep end. So yeah, I think it was the best choice for me to be able to do both.
Thanks, Shauna. David, did you want to say how you decided to do?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really difficult decision. You know, you have to make this decision when you've done the 3-year degree, really, or most people do. And I think generally most people look at it as, you know, solicitors have day-to-day conduct with matters, have a lot of client contact, and, you know, generally work as part of a team. I knew that I liked a lot of client contacts, so that led me down the solicitors route. On the flip side, barristers do a lot of advocacy in court, generally work more independently and are a bit more independent in their working and how they do things. But then at the same time, when I went on to the LPC, I did the advocacy module, which all students have to undertake. And I really liked doing advocacy, and I thought I was quite good at it. But I've been in the employment tribunal. I've done a case on my own in the employment tribunal, in the county court. So I think in my view, even if you pick the solicitor route, you can, as already previously been mentioned, you can do the solicitor advocate route, and you can actually change your mind and go over and actually practice on the bar. There are some requirements that you need to go through, but that is an option for you.
Thanks, David. We'll have one more. Andrew, did you want to add anything?
No, yeah, of course. I think primarily the reason that's motivated me is purely lifestyle and the lifestyle differences between being a solicitor and being a barrister. The reason I know John is the fact that both he and I did our bar course together many moons ago. And whilst I was trying to get pupillage, I eventually ended up working in a solicitor's firm and realised that actually what I wanted to do at the bar, which is the advocacy, which other speakers have mentioned, and which is also the in-depth approach and really going into a file, really understanding particular niche issues as well, is something that is actually available at the solicitor's side of things. Then it comes to a matter of lifestyle. Barristers are self-employed. They have to be able to manage all their own affairs with the assistance of chambers. Okay, they do get to pick and choose when they work, but then they don't get any holiday pay, they don't get any sick pay, they don't get any pensions. And it's off the back of that really, and the stress that I know I've put barristers under and I've dropped papers on them at 5 o'clock the night before. I just decided actually I prefer working as a solicitor, working in a solicitor's office. So that was primarily the reason I decided to switch over to become a solicitor.
Thanks, Andrew. John, do you want to do question 5?
Yeah, okay. So the next question that we've had from our attendees tonight is, what has been the most difficult or shocking thing to happen to you in your legal careers? Have anyone who has a burning example they want to jump in with? Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my the primary work I do being defence, health and safety, the one thing that really jumps to mind, as I'm sure it does to many other panellists, is obviously coronavirus. As others have mentioned, it's massively changed the way we work. But certainly in terms of my practice area, you suddenly have reams and reams of new guidance from the HSE, from Public Health England, and from others about how it should be managed and how it should be dealt with. And certainly when the first few days of kind of lockdown, when all that came in, we were finding a lot more clients were contacting us in terms of, okay, well, what do we do? And certainly it's the first kind of occasion where I've come across legal issues where actually it's new to everyone. There is no kind of settled position on the best way to approach things. And I think I imagine that would certainly be the same for a lot of people kind of dealing with, the new normal, how coronavirus has changed legal practice. It really has turned some practice areas kind of up on their head. But I mean, outside of coronavirus, which I'm sure is probably going to be one of the popular conversations topic of conversation. For me, I found, given the work I do, defence, primarily defence kind of court work in the criminal sphere, when I was quite junior, I found that actually having resilience in negotiations with other sides was something I found quite difficult with. I remember one of the first hearings I did, I was, I think, 6 months in, and a 20-year core barrister was opposite me, giving me a pretty hard drubbing in terms of the way we pleaded the case. And actually, it's one of the things you don't always get people, you're not always prepared for, is how to develop confidence in your own abilities and resilience in your own abilities. And certainly it was something I found quite difficult with. And the way I kind of resolved that was leveraging my colleagues' experience. There will be difficult moments, probably most weeks of the first few years that you're in practice, probably for first decade you're in practice. And the way, I guess, to get used to that is to try and borrow the experience of others where you can. And certainly I found that stood me in good stead for the first few years of my practice.
Brilliant. Excellent answer there, Stephen. Does anybody else have any examples at all? Shauna?
Yeah, so I actually trained in-house in a social housing company. And when I qualified, I didn't want to kind of go into residential property and was looking for kind of a firm that would take me on and retrain me. So I actually retrained into commercial property, and I think that was maybe not the most difficult, but it was definitely the most challenging. You know, having to kind of learn on my feet an entirely new topic, because I never did it at the LPC, so it was all completely new to me, learning on the job. And for me, that was kind of, you know, being thrown in the deep end and having to kind of learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can, to be kind of as efficient as a solicitor could be, kind of as a solicitor, and to help my client. So from my perspective, that was probably one of the biggest challenges I've faced, while also kind of moving from in-house role to private practice, you know, having to meet targets and billable hours. It was all kind of totally new to me, and it's about learning and kind of, you know, being the best you can be and really challenging yourself. So yeah, they were probably my biggest challenges to date.
Yeah, do we have anyone else that would like to contribute? Sarah? And then Andrew next.
This happened 25 years ago, and it still sends shivers down my spine when I think about it. I was about 2 weeks into my family seat, so in the second 6 months of my training contract, and I was sent down to the county court. It was court day. There had been overnight arrests of people breaching non-molestation and occupation orders. My supervising solicitor ran off to the police station to take some instructions from one client, and I was sent down to sign the legal aid form. It was called the green form in those days, which is probably far more than, you know, far too long ago for anyone else here to remember what it was. And as I was getting the client to fill in the details and sign it so we could get paid, the court usher said that His Honour Judge G wanted us in court now because he had another trial to deal with. And I sort of did the, hang on, I'm just the trainee, I'm only here to take details. And I was ushered into court opposite Paul Hart of counsel, remember him very, very well, having never really done any advocacy at all, not really knowing much about family law, with a client who was about to be sent to prison for commission of a non-molestation and occupation order. And I remember thinking that nothing here I could do was going to be the right thing. And I sort of squeaked out at the judge that it really wasn't fair because I was just the trainee and they had counsel. And I remember Paul Hart turning around to me and saying, it's all right, I won't bite. And then the poor judge thinking, I've got to get rid of this. And, you know, after some hurried conversations where he said, if your client admits this, I'm minded not to send him to prison, I kind of managed to take some instructions and sort of nodded that that was acceptable, and then the whole thing was dealt with. It was literally the most horrific experience of my life. However, advocacy could never get any worse than that. And as I came out, I thought, well, you know, we managed it, didn't we? It happened. So I guess the moral of the story is, you know, mostly people know what they're doing. They're never really in that situation going to let your client be prejudiced. And if you can't handle that, then anything after that is probably fine.
Thank you, Sarah. Good story there. I think that's a good moral, because you'll tend to find a lot of people want to get into the comfort zone and they'll do a certain amount of work that they feel okay with, and then anything that's outside of that, a lot of people try and put it off. But if you always try and push yourself within this career, that's how you move on to the next thing. You always try something that's a little bit too difficult, and that's how you progress. But it is so easy to think, oh, that's too difficult, I'm not going to touch that at all. So if you're always just slightly pushing yourself, push the envelope all the time, and that's really the best way to progress. Andrew, did you want to answer as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, probably one of the most shocking things that I've found in my legal career is basically disappointing clients, but to the degree where they're actually shouting down the phone and swearing at you. When it comes to that, I think it's always important to remember that what might simply be effectively a very minor bit of work for you is something that can be all-consuming for a person involved in the legal process. They're not as familiar in the legal system as you are, and so I think it's always important to essentially bear that in mind and make sure that you do treat all your clients with the same kind of degree and attention to detail that you would with a really significant case as compared with a really minor, say, small RTA claim.
Sorry, take myself off mute. Sorry, I was saying I'll move on to the next question in just a moment. One thing I should say is, as we're going through this, if anyone thinks of any questions that they want to ask later on in the session, feel free to pop it in the group chat at this stage as well. So you can press the chat at the bottom of the screen and type any questions in if you think of anything as we're going along. The next question that we have is, what advice would you give to a law student studying at a non-Russell Group university who wants to be a solicitor? Have anyone that would? Lucy?
Yeah, I went to a university which, although it's in the top 10, it's not in the Russell Group, and I don't think it's been a problem at all. So I think for most people, if you get a good degree and you can come out of university with lots of extracurricular experience and maybe get some work experience as well, do not sweat about the fact that it's not in the Russell Group, because at the end of the day, as I think has been mentioned previously through this panel event, employers are looking at what you've got to offer in terms of skills and competencies and things like that, as well as the academics. So do not sweat about the fact that your university might not be in the Russell Group.
Excellent advice. Anyone else like to contribute to this answer?
Yes, I think I would like to add as well. It's really not the question that whether Russell Group University or any other non-Russell Group university. It's just a question really is that how, as Lucy has put it, our other benefits, that how you learn yourself through your 3 years course, and then how do you prepare yourself to go to this profession. That's quite important, really. So of course, degree matters. You have to have a good degree when you come out of it. But as the question is put, that whether non-Russell Group university matters to get that, which I think is no, it doesn't matter. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Dave, I think you had your hand up as well, and then we'll move on to Andrew after you.
Yeah, I wouldn't let it bother you too much. I went to a bottom half. I went to the bottom half in terms of the university I went to. It was in the bottom half of the league tables. I think as long as you come out with, a good grade, and you have other things on your CV. So what I did was I got a lot of work experience. I had other work that I was, undertaking, such as bar work, that sort of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't let it bother you. I think I did at least 10 applications for training contracts, and I think I was only rejected from 1 at the paper stage. So I don't think firms are as bothered about it as they used to be.
Excellent. And Andrew? Andrew, did you have your hand up?
I didn't. Sorry, I was just trying to unmute my.
Oh,
mic,
sorry.
So
sorry, I've seen the hand go up. I thought,
no problem.
Right. Okay. Not a problem.
No.
Okay.
No. Sorry.
Right. Next question is: do you think the availability and accessibility of training contracts will mirror the 2008 financial crisis and become increasingly difficult to attain post-coronavirus? So effectively, the question is: post-coronavirus, do you think there will be fewer training contracts? And do we have anyone that would like to start on this one? Shauna?
Yeah, I think initially there probably will be a decrease, just, with firms needing to kind of work out how much work they're actually going to get in and kind of see where things fall with the pandemic and how it impacts their businesses and their clients. But I think people are still working. A lot of companies and businesses and firms are still working remotely. So I don't think it's going to mirror the 2008 crisis as much, because people are kind of desperately trying to keep things moving. It might be a lot slower, but I think firms are kind of probably looking to make sure, you know, they can kind of keep the doors open initially. And then I do think they'll probably recruit, you know, for trainees, because there is still kind of recruitment within law, and a lot of positions are still kind of being advertised. So I don't think it'll be as bad as 2008, but to what degree, it's kind of hard to know at the moment, I think.
Excellent. Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in? Lucy, I think you had your hand up, and then we'll move to Sarah.
Yeah, I think it depends as well what areas when you apply to law firms, what areas they're offering in their training contracts as well, because I would imagine that maybe more commercial areas might be a bit more in difficulty because of the circumstances around coronavirus. Then again, equally they could bounce back quite quickly depending on what happens. But if you are looking to do areas where individuals are involved, such as family or like my area of law, private client, some of those are actually quite steady, and litigation seems to be quite steady at the moment as well, because at the end of the day, people are always going to have personal problems that they need sorting out, regardless of the pandemic. So I think, I don't know if it's going to be quite as bad as 2008 in terms of recruitment for trainees, but I think that it's important to maybe look at which areas of practice a firm offers, and that might indicate the likelihood of them offering a training contract.
Thank you. And Sarah, you had your hand up as well.
I was going to say something similar to Lucy, and I mean, I remember 2008 and then the period after that, and we were seeing what was happening with recruitment. There was a slump in 2008. I think we're in slightly different circumstances here, and it's probably a bit early to tell, but when one area, you know, decreases in terms of work available, another area tends to become more busy. I think what's different about the current situation is that firms have more options in terms of recruitment. So I saw just on chat something was coming up about legal apprenticeship. So I think there are firms who are going to start looking at how they can use the levy and maybe having apprentices in instead of doing the traditional trainee route is an option for them. That was never available before. I think what we also saw a couple of years after the 2008 slump was suddenly then we had gaps in the market for qualified solicitors. And again, because of the way legal training is changing, I think we're going to touch on that later. You know, I think there are more options available for people to have to do things in slightly different orders. So yeah, probably a bit early to tell, but I think that there are different ways of dealing with it this time that perhaps weren't there before.
Great. Okay. Next question that we have is, how do you continue your personal development while practicing as a solicitor in terms of attending external events and professional courses? So does anyone want, Lucy?
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of that actually since I qualified into my firm in January, because we do a lot of work for rural clients, farmers, land estates, things like that. We get involved in quite a lot of events with the National Farmers Union. We're actually their panel solicitors for the North East. So that means I go along to events that are run by the NFU, such as talks and networking events with them. And also we do things like we go out on stands at the agricultural shows normally when it's not cancelled by the pandemic, obviously. In February, I went down to the National Farmers Union conference in Birmingham, which obviously, although not a legal event, it's very important to the sector that my clients come from. So it was really interesting to go and actually go to a farming conference where you can learn about what they do and their businesses, and therefore how that might impact them as clients, and what issues may be important to them at the time. And all those things have been really good for networking. And I think it's really important to write that down actually when you're going through the process of going to these events. You know, think about the events that you've been to, who you met, why is it important, and what have you got from that event. And I think that's really good for your development, not just as a lawyer, but also knowing your clients and knowing their sector as well.
Okay, do we have anybody else that would like to jump in on professional development, professional courses, anything of that nature? Okay. All right, in just a moment, we're going to jump on to the spontaneous questions that we've had during the session and any further questions that people have. But just before we do that, I don't know if I'd like to hand over to Sarah just to do a couple of minutes just to explain about the SQE and any changes to qualifications as a solicitor.
Yeah, sure. There's lots of questions about this. And there is information out there. I'm going to plug our own website at the moment because we do have a great FAQ page on law.ac.uk which tells you certainly our position on SQE and what's happening. So that's just a reference I'll plug for anyone who wants to check it out later. What we know at the moment is that the SRA, regardless of the current situation, are still saying that SQE will come in September 2021. That's September next year. There are still some unanswered questions, but that's what we're being told. We're also being told by the SRA that anyone who has already started a law degree or a conversion course like the GDL before that time will be allowed to choose to continue with the current route, which is the LPC. Now, there are some clarifications to be made by the SRA here, but I think what we do know is that people starting at September this year, September 2020, will still be able to come under the old regime, the current regime, if you like. What happens with courses that start later on in the year is not yet clear. So that's all I can say at that point. And we're waiting for more clarification from the SRA. So the current process, qualifying law degree or a GDL, having done a non-law degree, you then go on to do the legal practice course, either full-time or part-time, so a year or 2 years, depending on your choice. Your training contract or period of recognised training, which is typically 2 years. I mean, there are some people who are doing a combined LPC part-time study and training contract at the same time, but effectively it's still the same thing. After you complete your LPC and you've done your training contract, you do the PSC within your training contract, the professional skills course, and then at that point you apply to the SRA to be admitted as a solicitor. So it's a relatively straightforward path that I would think probably most of us here went through. So the new situation is going to be, you will still need a degree, but there is no longer going to be any definition as such of a qualifying law degree for solicitors anyway. I won't talk about the bar because we're talking about the LPC tonight, but so as far as the SRA are concerned, you just need an undergraduate degree. And they're also talking about or equivalent experience. But I think that would have to be something quite substantial to equate to a degree, you know, sort of running, you know, significant business or something like that. So let's assume we're talking about people getting a degree. After that, everyone, regardless of their degree, whether they've done a law degree or not, everyone will have to do SQE1. And SQE1 is going to be a series of multiple choice exams combining some of the key areas. There's no recognised course anymore. You do not have to do a course. You could effectively go and do an English literature degree and then just off your own back go and sit SQE1, and no one can stop you doing that. I don't think that's the advice we're giving to people. And I think, you know, if you haven't got a law degree, certainly our position is people will still need some kind of training. But there are going to be a lot of different options as to what courses you take and what they look like. So lots of different providers, lots of different things on offers containing lots of different things. So what I would say is it's really important to make those comparisons and see what you're getting and how it's going to work. I think the other key thing probably to say about it is if you do decide to take a course, unlike the current situation, it's highly unlikely your exam fees, your SQE fees, will be included within that price. You're going to have to pay for that separately. And it's not clear at the moment, but I think there's some indication that maybe SQE1 might be, I don't know, in the region of £1,500 to sit those MCQ exams. Once you've done SQE1, you can then progress on to SQE2, and that is the bit of the solicitor's exam that is going to assess your skills. And now it's anticipated that, again, people can do this with a course or without a course. Some courses will have it all wrapped up together, some will not. What we do know about SQE2, again, although the SRA have not yet been crystal clear on it, is it will be more expensive because there's a whole series of different practical assessments, legal research, interviewing, advocacy, oral skills, all of these things can have to be assessed. And it's a lot more expensive to do that than to assess on a multiple choice question test. Again, we're not clear on the fees for that, but potentially SQE1 and SQE2 could be somewhere in the region of £4,000 together. That's the kind of figures we're hearing at the moment. But again, I must stress, nothing is definite yet at this stage. We haven't got final figures yet from Kaplan, who are the sole assessment provider. And I suppose that's the other thing to say. Unlike now, where you sit your assessments with whoever you do your course with, there will be one single assessment provider, and you will have to pay those exam fees directly to them. If you're going to do a course, you're going to have to pay your course fees. What everyone will then also have to do is qualifying work experience. And I suppose the key difference with this is it doesn't need to be a standard 2-year training contract. You still need to do 2 years effectively, but that could be made up of different work experience with different firms. It could even, it's been suggested, include 6 months working in, say, a legal advice centre or some kind of pro bono project. So there's potentially a lot more flexibility as to what qualifying work experience means. And it can be made up in lots of different ways and also at different times. So you could do SQE1 and then do some qualifying work experience and then do SQE2 and then come back and do some more qualifying work experience. It's perhaps not quite as rigid as the current situation. I just saw a question come up that I don't know if you want me to take, John, which is would I recommend?
I was just about to ask that.
Your LPC. And it's a really tough one. I will be completely honest. I don't think all the firms yet are entirely clear what they're going to do. They're trying to align their recruitment. They are trying to work out how do we cope with people who are still coming through when we've recruited them 2 years ago, and then the new people, and how can we make that work? As always, I would say lawyers, as a bunch, we're relatively cautious and conservative with a small c. There were a lot of people saying, kind of like to see what it happens in the first year before we dive into it. Certainly the impression we're getting is that firms are not rushing to put people through SQE rather than the current system that they know. I suppose it's really a question for you. I think it's a question of you know, what your personal circumstances are, what works for you, what your financial situation is, and the kind of firm you're looking to go to, and sort of really trying to see what they're doing. So I don't think there is a one answer for everybody. What I can say that we're very clear about is that because of this existing path carrying on while people are still currently doing law degrees and will carry on in the old system, we do think the LPC is going to be around for at least a few years post 2021. And like I say, I think it may take the profession a little while to weigh it up and see if they're happy. We are being told by the SRA that this is going ahead regardless in September 21. It's coming nearer and nearer. There are still a lot of unanswered questions. There are still a lot of things that we just don't know in terms of fees, how SQE2 is going to be assessed. There are some real questions about the results and whether there is prejudice under the new system to certain groups of students. So I think we've got a lot of unanswered questions yet, but at the moment I would suggest if you are already doing a law degree, you have a choice. I think it's wise to try and talk to the legal profession. So again, I don't know if anyone else has got views from their own firms as to what position you're taking at the moment and what the preference is.
Thank you. I don't know if there's anyone on the panel that has any input on this about how their firms are approaching this at present. No, I think because it is so new, as you say, it's all up in the air and people are really playing it by ear because we just don't know how things are going to progress in this regard. So it's one of these where by time will tell. Probably people will stick to the traditional route for some time, and then once there's some sort of precedent set and people can see which is better, then maybe people will start making their decisions from there.
I think what we do know is that firms know what the LPC is and they know what they're getting at the end of it. And certainly I think one of the big concerns is that if people just do the bare bones of what's needed for SQE and don't take a course that perhaps is a master's course with some additional content that certainly we're looking at delivering, so that you do something that's a bit like the LPC with all the extra things. I think there is a concern from firms that just the SQE might miss some key things that you would get with the LPC. So, like I say, it's a difficult thing to advise anyone generally, because every situation is different. But people know what the LPC is, and if you're just going to do the SQE and you're not going to do a course with additional content, then I think you have to think about how you fill those gaps. If you're then coming up against people with the LPC or with a wider qualification where they've taken perhaps a full master's qualification with additional content. So, for example, none of the electives that are on the LPC will exist for SQE. If you're interested in family or employment or commercial property, you know, mergers and acquisitions, all of these things that people have been doing as a matter of course and taking that into the firms, that simply won't exist unless you do a course that has content above and beyond what's on offer for SQE. But very much a personal decision, I would say.
Excellent, thank you. What I'll do now is I'll work my way through the questions that I've had sent through to the chat. So I'll work through those as we're going. If anyone has any questions that they think of as we're going through, feel free to put your hand up. So the first one that we've seen, quite a good question actually, is do you recommend paralegal work before applying for a training contract in order to obtain a better chance of being accepted? So do we have anyone that wants to jump in on this one? Would you recommend paralegal work? Dave?
Yeah, so I did paralegal work, I did a year, and when I was applying, a lot of firms did come out and say, yeah, you know, you got through to this stage because we like your paralegal experience. So yeah, I definitely consider doing paralegal work before applying to a training contract.
Anybody else? Shauna?
Yeah, I totally kind of mirror what Dave's just said. I found it a lot easier to actually get a training contract and get other legal jobs when I was in one. I think when you're not kind of in the legal profession, it's a lot harder to kind of transition across, whereas I think people take you a bit more seriously when you're in the field and you've kind of got a rough idea as to kind of what's going on around you. So yeah, I would definitely recommend even just kind of legal executive, anything, just kind of get some sort of legal work as soon as you can, really.
Yeah. I think really, Lucy?
I'd just like to add to that as well, that don't worry if you can't get your foot in the door in a law firm in a paralegal role exactly, because there's actually a lot of work out there in things like law centres and pro bono and charities and things like that. I mean, when I was looking to apply for a training contract, I was working for the charity Shelter as a housing advisor, basically. So I was doing landlord and tenant and that kind of thing. So although my job title wasn't exactly paralegal, you know, I was still picking up that experience in terms of dealing with a caseload and dealing with legal problems, but maybe just outside the traditional setting of a law firm and a paralegal role. So I would agree that I think it does make it easier for you to transition across if you've got that paralegal experience, and I definitely recommend it if you can get it. But if you can't, you've got to think outside the box a little bit and look at other opportunities to get legal experience that might not be so much down the traditional route.
Yeah, I think one of the big selling points about doing paralegal work before applying for a training contract is it shows that you can do the job, because quite often when you come to do application forms, you'll have questions along the lines of why would you make a good solicitor? Why do you want to do this practice area? So at least if you've gone into a firm and you've had a go at paralegaling in the practice area that you want to do, you can show A, that you've done it, you've got a genuine interest in it, and you'll be able to give a more substantial answer as to why it is that you want to do that practice area. And secondly, if you get into the right firm, you'll probably be doing a lot of the same tasks that a solicitor would do anyway. So I always remember many, many years ago when I did paralegal work, I did everything from issuing the claim, drafting particulars of claim, taking witness statements off clients, drafting the witness statements, all the way through to going to court and doing advocacy as a paralegal as well. So doing things in district judges' chambers. So I was able to do all the things that a solicitor was doing anyway, so that when I came to do applications for training contracts, I was able to say, look, I can do the job anyway. These are the things that I can do. And that's the real benefit that you get from paralegal work, is all the experience that you gain. which you can then put into your CV and your application forms. Does anyone else have anything to contribute on that, or shall I move on to the next question? No. Okay. Let's see what we've got next. Right, this is quite a specific question. I'll see if there's anyone on the panel that can help with this. It says, how possible is it, or has it been, to work internationally as a UK qualified solicitor? And do you think this will change dramatically in light of coronavirus? Does anyone have any experience to assist with this question at all? No.
I mean, a lot of the work that we do as a firm involves an international element to it. But I think I could only answer the question insofar as how things are working internationally in terms of cases and what have you. I don't really have an experience to say what prospects are in terms of actually moving internationally to go and work in another country, per se. But I mean, you know, post-COVID, I think it very much depends on what area of law you want to qualify into. I mean, the current market gives demand and gives rise to certain areas of law that have become busier than ever. And I think almost definitely there will be opportunities to explore in those certain areas, whether they're in the UK or internationally. I think it's just, we have to sort of wait and see how the market settles.
Thank you. The next question, this might be another one for Sarah actually. It says, do you think legal apprenticeships are becoming more recognised now compared to how they used to be? If so, do you think this could be a more recognised pathway into entering law for those who decide university isn't for them? I don't know if anyone has any experience of legal apprenticeships.
I think they are. I think initially with apprenticeships, because all that was on offer was a 6-year apprenticeship, there were few firms who necessarily went down that route, because to take someone at, say, 18 or slightly older and commit to them for 6 years is a really big undertaking, and not really how lawyers are used to working in terms of recruitment and sort of the difficulties of having someone on that programme for 6 years. What's now coming in is a graduate apprenticeship whereby you'll be able to come in after a degree, and I think there's a lot more interest from certain types of firms in that. So it's sort of a way, I suppose, of becoming qualified and doing your SQE prep and, you know, doing SQE, because apprenticeships will have to do that. That might well be more attractive. So yes, I think there's some movement there, and also I think from a financial point of view, because firms who are paying the levy are suddenly seeing that levy payment going out after perhaps saying they weren't that interested in it, and their chief financial officers saying, well, hang on a minute, what are we doing about this money? So I think people are starting to become more aware, and I think there will be a move towards it. How much towards 6-year apprenticeship, I don't know. And of course you say not going to university, but you would still study effectively a degree within the apprenticeship. That's how it works if you do the 6-year solicitor apprenticeship. But most of them, I think, are sort of online study with 1 day a week released from the office. But yeah, I think people are becoming more familiar, and I do think it'll become a recognised way forward, absolutely.
Okay, once again, the next question is quite specific, so I'll see if there's anyone on the panel that can help with this. It says, I'm a German citizen who moved to the UK in 2016. I'm now a final year law student. I'm planning to do my LPC before my training contract, and I'm just wondering whether it will implicate my training contract that I'm not from the UK. If anyone's got it. Shauna? Oh, you might need to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, there we go. I'm actually a Belgian citizen, so I came over for university when I was 18, and I haven't had any issues kind of with a training contract or the LPC while I was here. I think if anything, it you know, it adds a bit of something different for, you know, recruiters, and when you're applying for a training contract, that, you know, you've got something else to offer. So yeah, it's not a problem.
Excellent. Certainly provide something to help you stand out when it comes to doing application forms. Okay. Yeah. The next question says, when you say private client, what does that cover generally? It says, would it include and be connected to crisis management or other elements involved there?
No, it's not really crisis management, although what you are dealing with is often people who are bereaved. So private client is anything to do with, I suppose, managing people's personal or financial affairs and planning really for older age or what happens to their finances and things like that after death. So I suppose in that respect, maybe it is crisis management, if you like, because you're dealing with situations where people have lost mental capacity or when they've died. But what I do as a private client solicitor, generally speaking, is I take instructions and draft wills for people. I also manage the process of after someone's died, taking their estate, so everything that they own, from property to even animals, pets, things like that, antiques, all sorts of things, and managing that through the process of applying for a grant of probate and administering the estate. So it's effectively putting into motion what is in their will, or if they don't have a will, then it's an intestacy. So you're dealing with things like perhaps trying to trace beneficiaries. I don't know if anybody's seen the programme Air Hunters, but it can be a bit like that. Sometimes you have to trace missing beneficiaries, work out who might be entitled to take that person's money and property after they've died. It also covers things like lasting powers of attorney, which is quite interesting because that brings in lots of questions about mental capacity and I suppose protecting vulnerable people from fraud when they're in a position where they can't make decisions for themselves. So I draft the lasting powers of attorney documents, but I have to meet with the person who is wanting to give away the power to manage their own finances to other people, which is effectively what a lasting power of attorney document allows you to do. And I have to do all sorts of checks with them, really, by interviewing them in quite a lot of depth, to make sure that they know exactly what they're doing. They have the mental capacity to understand that decision that they're making and what they're doing, and to make sure there's nothing like fraud or undue influence. There's no perhaps relatives in the background who are trying to get money out of them and they're putting pressure on them to give away the power to manage their finances and things like that. I think because of the nature of the work, we do a lot of work with elderly clients, and that can include things like managing their personal and financial affairs when they are unable to do that for themselves. And we also sort of, dabble a bit in tax advice as well, because obviously when you are planning what to do with your estate after you die, you have to be aware of the inheritance tax implications of that. So I get a lot of clients, particularly I suppose like the farming clients, or anybody who owns property or land. They want to know how, what will happen to my business or my land after I've died, in terms of how much of it is going to end up being paid out in death duties, really. So it's actually a really varied area of practice, and it's a really good one if you like people, because certainly before coronavirus there's a lot of face-to-face contact, and I don't think, depending on how this goes, I don't think it'll entirely change, because actually when you are dealing with people, like if you get a new probate case, for example, and you have the executives coming in to see you, it's often family members of the person who's died, who want advice on how to deal with that person's property after they've died. They're often, they're coming in sometimes 2 or 3 days after they've lost their mum or dad or whoever it is, and they're not in a really good frame of mind, obviously, and it's actually quite important to have that face-to-face contact with them, because they're going through quite a difficult time. But it is a really interesting area of practice, because it is so varied. And I mean, I've done things like, you can go off and do things like charity law and that kind of work branches off from it. So yeah, I think sort of in a nutshell, that's what private client is, really. So yeah, that'll be. it in
Thank
a
you.
nutshell,
Very,
really.
very comprehensive answer there. Okay, so we're coming up towards the end of the session now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to each of our panelists one by one, just to give us a final sort of soundbite, final piece of advice to take away. So it could be anything from, you know, piece of advice for the students, what you enjoy about your job, why you like being a solicitor. So any sort of takeaway message that we've got. So I'm going to work my way around the screen. So I'll start in the top left-hand corner with Shauna. I think you're on mute again.
Yeah, sorry about that. Basically, I just try and drill home, don't get disheartened when applying for jobs, for training contracts. You know, it's a really hard market, and I know, you know, I sent out hundreds nearly of applications, trying to get, you know, jobs, get my foot even just in the door somewhere. So just, yeah, don't get disheartened, stay kind of motivated and determined. And yeah, I'm really glad I did kind of pursue my career in commercial property, and you know, did the transition and the jump, you know, so just stick with it. You know, challenges shouldn't really put you off. If anything, it should kind of motivate you and inspire you to kind of work harder.
Fantastic, thank you. Lucy, any final words for the students?
Yeah, I think when it comes to applying for training contracts, it's really important to think about the type of firm that you would like to go into. And I always say, I have a mentee who I always say to her when she's looking at training contract applications, finding your perfect training contract is actually a bit like finding the perfect match on Tinder. So you've got to match up your skills and interests with the firm that you're wanting to apply to, and to demonstrate in your application why you are a good match with them, what you can bring to the firm. So I think that's really important. You know, there's no point, for example, for me, you know, I'm quite happy in a rural firm. I would not be happy in a city firm. And I think you've got to know yourself in that respect, as well as thinking about, you know, where you might get a training contract.
Excellent, thank you. Sarah, any words of advice?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me to say to students is network, take advantage. You know, there are so many people out there who've been through exactly the same thing as you, and actually vast amounts of people are willing to help. And you know what, if you ask someone for help and they say no, well then you're in no worse position anyway. That's always been my advice to people. Most people within the legal profession want to help and will give a hand up. You know, people are not pulling up ladders behind them. So come to things like this. Someone asked on the questions about virtual experience programs and virtual internships. Gosh, you know, do whatever is available at the moment. You know, go on Twitter and follow legal people, because there is so much help and advice out there, and that's how you will get to where you need to get to, because people will help and you don't have to struggle on your own, and most people are incredibly willing to help. So just ask.
No, I think that's fantastic advice, because as you say, the worst thing anyone can say if you ask for help is no. And as you say, you're in no worse position, so you might as well just be bolshy. Dave, any final words?
Yeah, I've got 2 points. Firstly, don't just rely on grades. You know, firms are wanting more than grades these days, so you know, you need to be doing the pro bono stuff. Any paralegal work experience you can get, that sort of thing is always favoured by firms. The second piece of advice would be, when making applications, proofread them. So firms hate it when there's, you know, you've answered a question on an application form and it's littered with errors, grammatical errors, spelling errors, that sort of thing. Just go through it multiple times. If you're not good at that sort of thing, then get somebody else to do it for you. So yeah, those would be my 2 main points.
Brilliant, thank you. Sunil, would you like to add anything?
I think Lucy and Sarah have raised a very important point, and Lucy mentioned a key word, which was mentee. I think one thing that has massively helped me in my legal career today is having the right people around me who are there to support me both professionally and personally. So just don't be afraid to reach out to people. You know, there are partners that have been partners at big firms for 20, 30 years, but they were in your position at one point in time, and everybody is really willing to help. So just don't be afraid to network, don't be afraid to sort of reach out to people and build relationships, and just build relationships with as many people in positions that you ultimately want to be in. and keep in touch, because the support and experience they can give you insight to is invaluable. I can say that personally, because a lot of my, I've a lot of support in my legal career has come from a mentor, a guy that trained me many years ago. I don't work for him anymore, but I still, once every couple of days will pick up the phone to him and just get general advice. And I don't think anybody is in a position in their career where they don't need a mentor to guide them and help them. So that's my piece of advice.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Ishrat, any final words?
I think for me, I just would say that the work experience is quite valuable. So I have found it in my life to become a solicitor. Work experience was very valuable for me. So I would stress that to get as much experience as possible. So that's really I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, do you have any words of wisdom for the students?
Yeah, I think sometimes, so now I have a few kind of mentees who get quite worried at early stages of their kind of LPC or their degree, where they feel they don't know what kind of practice area they want to do. And the thing I always say is, well, part of the experience and part of the process is actually figuring out.
Finished, John. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. No, not a problem. I was just saying, I think people can often get quite worried about not knowing exactly what practice area they want to go into at an early stage. And I always say, as much of the process is about actually figuring out what you don't want to do sometimes, as much as you do. Certainly, when I was a student, I didn't know that health and safety, and certainly in the criminal sphere, was a practice area that you could do, or that environmental law was a practice area that could support an entire team of solicitors, let alone kind of one or two in one particular area. So I think it's easy sometimes to be a bit hard on yourself, to think, well, actually, hang on, I should know from day one almost where I want to go off and do, what I want to go off and do. And I think I'd echo kind of Shauna, Sarah, and Sunil's points about leveraging that experience of others, trying to ask for help where you can, because actually, if you don't ask, you don't get, and you may not find out about a practice area that you've never even considered that actually could suit you down to the ground.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll turn to Andrew.
Always a problem going last. Everyone says what you were going to say. But I'd probably just pick it up on networking, and just a practical tip in respect to that, and also a cheeky plug for all the local junior lawyers divisions is to search on Google and find your local junior lawyers division, and also look for the national junior lawyers division. They give a lot of networking opportunities through education events and events like this that John and Sunny have put on. So get involved with them. It's a very easy way and very unpressurized way to network if you go along to those kinds of events, and normally it usually does provide some kind of uptick for you in getting your face known amongst the junior end of the profession.
No, I couldn't agree more, Andrew. It really is a good way to get ahead. And certainly if you're making these connections nice and early, it gets your face known. And then you never know, you're going for an interview, it might be with somebody that you've met before. So it can really help you get ahead. But if anything, it's good just to go along, network with practitioners, get some good advice, and it helps you going forwards. So that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for coming along to watch tonight. I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody that's been on the panel, and of course to Sunny for helping me organise this. The next event that we have is next Monday, and that will be what we've called our alternative pathways event. So that's people who are now in practice but have taken various routes to get there, so not the traditional route, hence why we've called it alternative pathways. If you'd like to sign up for that event, you're more than welcome to do so. It's on the same page that you've used for this event. Tonight's event has been sponsored by publicspeakingtuition.com. So once again, I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone for attending, and I will send an email out afterwards to ask for any feedback, either good, or if you think there's anything that can be improved for the future. I'm always open to any criticism whatsoever. It helps make these events better for me and of course better for you. So once again, thank you for attending, and I will see you next time. Thank you.